Women are expected to be the shock absorbers and like the buffers of men's violence. And I want to talk about it a little bit more because this came up last night. My husband, we had a birthday dinner, and some of his friends from his men's group came over. Like one came from like far out of town, and these three particular men, my husband and the two that were there last night, are not fighters. They've never been fighters. They hate fights. They do everything they can to avoid fights, and they always have. And the subject came up last night of like, you know, have you ever been in a fight or, you know, close to a fight, or what happened? And all of them had developed skills to avoid fights. You know, one of them had, his best friend was like huge. And because his best friend was so big, no one messed with him. One of my other friends, I forget the details of it, but he basically figured out a way to just kind of avoid, you know? And then Anthony, my husband, was talking about how he always used ways to, you know, use humor or something like to kind of like talk his way out of any situation where he have to fight. So he's like never been in a fight. And I love that. And he doesn't ever want to fight. Like, he's not one of these men. Like I've dated a man before where I was like, oh my God, please don't let him start something. You know, like there's nothing worse than being like, oh my God, is he gonna fight? Like, do I have to try to break this up? Do I have to try to, you know, like a child, like redirect his attention? Because I've definitely done that before, where, you know, a man was drunk, and then I could tell like he wanted to like start some stuff, and then I like literally used like flirting and you know, just like like my schmexuality. God, I hate that I have to censor myself so much on here. Basically just started like, you know, teasing him and all this stuff to like redirect his attention. And I just remember feeling so gross about that. Like so cheap, because I didn't want to do that. It wasn't coming from a place of authenticity. It wasn't coming from a place of desire. It was literally being used, like my body was like bait to try to, you know, lure him away from violence. And I just remember like that did not sit well with me. But in my mind, like feeling gross about that was better than having to deal with the fallout of him getting in a fight and what that might look like for me and how I may have to take care of him and how I'm going to have to, like, I don't want to deal with that, right? And so it's like this impossible position that women are put in all the time, like just being responsible for men's violence. Even though I'm not responsible, I'm going to have to deal with the consequences of everything this man does, right? I'm going to have to, like another dude got in a fight over me, which no thank you, I didn't ask for that. And then I had to like, you know, I didn't have to, but I felt like I had to, you know, put ice on his eye and like take care of him. And I'm just so annoyed that women are expected to clean up the mess of men and their violence and their destruction and their self-destruction and their selfishness, right? So one of the many things that I like about being with Anthony is I never have to worry about him starting things. I never have to, like, I'm never embarrassed by him. I'm never worried about what he's gonna do or how I'm gonna have to clean up the mess of anything. And if anything, I'm like really proud to be with him. And when I see people respond to what he's talking about and how he makes people so calm and comfortable, like I love that. But I'm so used to, in my past, being with men that I'm on edge when we're in public because they're unpredictable and won't emotionally regulate. It's not that they can't, because men absolutely can. And don't ever think that they just lose their temper. I promise you, at work and in certain environments, they absolutely can control that temper, right? So they're very intentional about when they just can't regulate, and then it's our job. And yeah, I think that's another reason why I didn't date for most of my adult life, is because I was like, God, like, it's so much easier not having to like babysit a man in public and have to be responsible for a man in public and being embarrassed by a man in public, right? So back to the fighting thing, it was funny because I was like, it's so interesting that like men who, you know, like, I would hate to be raised as a man in patriarchy, despite all the money and the power and all of the stuff they get with it. I can't imagine that being worth it all. I can't imagine that being worth the dehumanization, the dehumanization tax that they pay. in terms of dehumanizing others and themselves, where they have to, the buyout is like, okay, you get all this stuff. You get to dominate people. You get to have power over people. You get to scare half the population, and then maybe even more depending on how big you are. And if you have pew-pews, right? But the price you pay is lack of empathy, lack of understanding, lack of any real depth, lack of even knowing what love feels like, much less giving it or receiving it. Because when you feel superior to someone, you cannot love them. And if you're dating a man who treats you like you're inferior to him, he does not love you. He cannot love you. Love is not based on that. And so when I think about like listening to them talk about like just, the adolescence, I was like, God, I'm terrified of men. I can't imagine being like a boy or teenage boy or even an adult man who is like not into fighting, doesn't want to fight, and having to navigate that, having to navigate the violence of other men. And then I was like, well, actually, I don't know if it's any worse. It's probably even, like I do that already as a woman, so how's that worse? But it was funny because I was like, it seems like the men who don't want to participate in the violence that patriarchy indoctrinates them with have to figure out, basically have to develop a lot of emotional intelligence to get around it, right? They figure out right away, like, well, I don't want to fight, but if I'm near a big guy, I'm less likely to get picked on, right? Or if I'm funny, if I am, this or that or whatever, they negotiate and they learn how to, like women do, how to use their intelligence, their brains, their emotional intelligence, their intuition to get out of situations so they don't die or just get harmed. And then it made me think, and then they asked me, have I ever been in a fight? I'm like, no, but I've had to break up fights. So then I told them the story about how when one of the many jobs where I was working with teenagers, and these were at-risk teenagers, and I hate that term, but they're basically teenagers who are on the backpacking course, and none of them really wanted to be there, but this wasn't like that prison kind, like they weren't forced there, they weren't kidnapped. They came of their own free will. And part of it was, some of them was to avoid juvenile. Some of it was just to like please their parents, because they had gotten in trouble with or whatever. And it was short. It wasn't like years. It was literally like 23 days. And it was actually one of the best trips I've ever taken. I've never seen so much growth. That's really what made me believe in that boys are not just like that, they can change. When they're taught how to conflict resolution that doesn't involve violence, when they're taught a healthy communication, and how to like deal with their things instead of run from them, like the growth I saw in just 23 days blew my mind. And these teenage boys were actually on some level, some of them were even more emotionally intelligent than I was, because at the time, because I was working in the outdoor industry, and just like men, I had kind of beat the humanity out of myself, dehumanized myself to be one of the boys, right? And so that trip with those men is what made me realize, like, God, like most of this is social conditioning, right? And one of the things, I understand why this was the approach, because it actually was effective, but I really honestly could not believe that I was put in this position where it was like, well, what do we do if two of the teenage boys fight? Granted, these boys are between the ages of 12 and 15, so they're not massive, but some 15-year-olds are huge. Some 15-year-olds look like they're in 18-year-old bodies, right? And we had a couple on there that were just massive. They outweighed me for sure. And we were taught that if these boys fight, it's the female instructor who is most likely to break up that fight, because a man won't hit a woman. And I remember at the time just being like, wait, what? I didn't sign up for this. Why do I have to do this? And this was before I'd been in an abusive relationship. And so if I were in that position today, I'd be like, what do you mean a man won't hit a woman? Do you know men? Do you know what they do behind closed doors? Like, do you understand that, like, literally those are the people unaliving us regularly? But now when I think about it, men don't hit women in front of people. And that's the thing. Because sure enough, when these two boys got in a fight, I jumped in between there face to face, and it stopped. Because men know that they can hit women. They just can't do it in front of other men. Now, I don't think that these boys would have ever wanted to hit me. Like, we were very close. This was at the end. We'd had a great trip. If they didn't know me, maybe they would have hit me. But the fact that men understand the limits, they can do whatever they want to behind closed doors, in private. It's just in public they can't hit women, only in public. There's a consequence for hitting us in public. There's shame involved with that. There may be, maybe, I've never seen it, honestly, not in my personal life, maybe the intervention of other men if men do that to us in public. Although literally it's always women who are going to step in. You can't convince me that men will do anything because I've never seen it happen. Not in my personal lived experiences. It is always women who save other women from men. But you know, that's the theory, is that men will intervene, right? And if they have witnesses, someone pulls out their phone, then they may actually go to jail for that. But we know nothing's going to happen to them if they do it behind closed doors. And so it is infuriating to me that I'm sitting at a table with 3 men who've never been in a fight, and I'm the only person who's been in a fight, and it wasn't mine. It was between men. And I was forced into a position to break up this fight that I didn't start, I didn't want to be involved with, I didn't ever want to happen. And not only did I have to break up, but then I had to deal with the consequences after it was done. I had to go and talk to both of them and, you know, calm them down. And then we had to meet up and all talk. And I know part of that was my job. But women are expected to literally put our lives in danger to keep men from fighting. So I will never have empathy for men in terms of patriarchy. Sorry, I would not have any more empathy for men under patriarchy than I do for women. Because again, you know, men are awful to each other. They bully each other. They deal with each other's violence all the time. But so do we. So do we. We're doing way more work to avoid their violence than any man ever will. So that's why, you know, people ask me all the time, why don't I like Jordan Peterson and all those guys? Scott Galloway, that bald dude. All these men, they keep wanting to center men in the conversations about how men are lonely and men are suffering under patriarchy. Yeah, we know. Believe me, we know. You will never, ever convince me that their pain is anywhere near their terror. The things that they have to do to navigate being a man it is not nearly amount of work and fear and energy and sacrifice and martyrdom and all this crap that women have to do the exact same thing with men. And unlike other men, we can't really defend ourselves. Like we can try. Sometimes we're successful, but it wasn't until I was literally pinned to the floor by my ex-boyfriend, physically restrained by this man, that I realized, oh, yeah, I always knew they were stronger than me, but it was just a theory, because I've always known I'm stronger up here and that I can row the same boats and climb the same mountains, and that they're physically not really stronger than me in terms of like doing the same things. But at the end of the day, that man, who wasn't even that big, had me completely powerless on the floor. And that experience literally changed my life. Like, not necessarily in a good way. You know, there's a lot, you know, ignorance is bliss. It's like, yeah, I mean, I know men are dangerous, but like at the end of the day, I'm a climber. I can do what men do. No, at the end of the day, they can do whatever they want. And all of the self-defense stuff that I had learned, forgot all of that in the moment. I'm sure I would have been able to do it if I had taken, you know, I don't want to say women are helpless. Like, we really do have a lot of things we can learn to arm ourselves, right? If I had taken a class more like recently and that happened, I was like, am I supposed to do something? I was supposed to put my finger in his eyes, but I put him in his mouth and he just tried to bite my finger off. So, oops. So as much as I do empathize with men, I care about men. I want them to heal. I love seeing them, like last night, gather together and just really go against everything they've been socialized to do. You know, so empathetic. One of them is the default parent, was one of the most nurturing people to their 1-year-old that was with them. Way more nurturing than I could be. You know, like I fully believe that, not just that example, but like my husband, I talk about this all the time. He's so much more nurturing than I am. You know, like you cannot convince me that men are incapable of this stuff. It's that a lot of them just don't want to do it. They don't want to change. They don't want to do the work. They won't let go of power. They won't let go. They have to feel better than someone. And okay, cool, bro. Like, if you want to dehumanize yourself and never experience true happiness and true love for that price, great. cool, I guess that's your choice. But I hope you die alone. I hope no woman ever hooks up with you, marries you, bears children with you. I hope you suffer alone, because we're done. I mean, not all of us. We're but I don't want to be men's handler in public. I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be embarrassed by men. I don't want to be literally constantly taken away from myself and having to center someone else because of their ridiculous behavior and refusal to take care of themselves and be a thoughtful human being. I'm done. I won't do it. Did it for too many decades. I don't think we should have to. But in its dying breath, patriarchy is going to expect us to be the shock absorbers of all of men's violence, all of men's BS, all of everything. And the less we do it, the less they will expect us to do it. And hopefully, at some point, they will have no choice but, I don't know, try to change. And if not, die alone. I hope you die alone. I don't want you bringing any woman down with you.